worst winter ever, right? With like up 70% loss or something like this. I mean, if you literally think about it, that's absolutely crazy. If in any other farm situation, you know, kind of like the poultry industry would lose 70% of their chicks, of their broilers, of their layers, of their, you know, the pigs would die 70%. If the farmer would be kind of like a 400-acre farm, it's like, in November, I need to order, you know, 50 heads of Angus cattle. And I'm like, what's going on? Because I know that about, you know, 48 are definitely going to die. You know, I mean, yeah, you're laughing, right? But I mean, that's literally the basis. Like, we all get these emails alert, like, put your order in now to order the bees, right, in November, because in March we're going to be sold out. We have to come to accept it as normal. I think it's crazy, you know, and I think it's crazy that the State House is not sending massive amount of monies. Today I got an email from Bee Culture that the bee lab in Beltsville is going to be closed, right? I mean, like, what? You know, I mean, they're literally pulling the rug from underneath our feet, and so we're kind of like a little bit left on our own devices. So we really have to scratch our heads because, and I think, to be honest, this was an illustration from the New York Times, and there was something about wildlife veterinarians. And since I'm like one of these vets that have no idea about your dog or a cat, but everything else, kind of, you know. So I think finally, you know, like in the public eye, especially with COVID and all this stuff, right? They're kind of like, oh, what do veterinarians have to do with it, right? Well, actually fairly a lot, because if you look at COVID, right, it probably came from the wild, you know, they have these wild kind of like mustelids, kind of like otters, weasels kind of thing, and they can harbor coronavirus a lot, and we know with the bird flu, right, it usually migrates from the bird to the pigs, and then the pigs are really known to really be virus factory, how they can potentially recombine this, and then it becomes nasty, and then we get it, right? So I think, you know, having veterinarians involved more in the beekeeper community, I think we can bring kind of like maybe a different form of thinking to it. I don't want to say that like, oh, here we come, like the 4th Army Corps marching in. It's like, this is how we're going to do it from now on, right? So, but I think a lot of times, at least I look at it from a different angle, right? Because we have been trained very differently to look at this animal pathogen, you know, bacteria, virus, human interaction very differently. And so we all know there's like this one buzzword in veterinary medicine or in the healthcare system, it's called One Health. And the whole idea is that, you know, we can't live without animals, we can't live without plants, the animal can't live without plants. So it's like everything is interconnected. So the moment that we take one kind of like little cart out of this cart house, it has a potential to collapse. Everything has a potential to collapse. And again, preaching to converted, you all know how important the bee as a pollinator superpower is and stuff. So anyway, sometimes I feel I have to make this introduction. So since I work with really weird species every day, not like with your dogs and cats, so even in our training as a veterinarian, then like taking it to the next level as a training of an exotic veterinarian, I'm like literally approaching everything very differently, because like you bring me that sick anteater in, right? So it's going to be a very different situation. So how many books are written out there, right? So there's not too much known about these anteaters. There's not, I mean, luckily we have some books about bees and stuff, but the training for us is kind of like, okay, we want to keep these animals in captivity successfully, and you probably have a friend or somebody that has a snake or like a Moluccan cockatoo or, right, a weird pet or even a guinea pig, right? And so I'm like, ooh, this is exotic, right? And so my point is like, okay, if we take on these animals like this Kenyan sand boa or this frilled lizard or a bearded dragon from Australia, or, you know, it's like, how do we provide really good care for this bearded dragon, right? If you just like start scratching your head, it's like, okay, let me read up, what does a bearded dragon do in the wild? Where does it live? Does it live in the desert? Does it live on a tree? Does it live in the sea? You know, what does it eat? So the more we know about these animals in the wild, the better we can provide this, because that's the secret to success, to keep these exotic animals in captivity. You want to mimic exactly what does, I mean, it's the same thing if, the White House, I read the other day, the White House is going to release some evidence that there's extraterrestrial life form out there. Maybe we are not alone, right? So those green people are going to come, they're going to pick 5 of us, put it in a big jar, in their mason jar, fly us back to the planet X35C, and then the first batch of us, I hate to break it to you, we're all going to die, because they're like, I don't know, maybe they open the jar, the atmosphere is full of nitrogen, we're all going to die very quickly. They're like, go back and get some more of these guys, and 5 more, and they're going to be like, don't open the jar, because the last time they all kind of like died very quickly, right? And so it's the same thing. It's like, okay, what's happening on Earth? Oh, they call it oxygen, Maybe they need oxygen, right? And so that's like literally, that's my daily thinking, right? The other thing that I noticed, and you all obviously are experts in Varroa, right? And we always kind of like, oh, we need to look at bees, and I'm going to buy the genetic resistance for Varroa, and the bee has the hygienic behavior for Varroa. And I, as a veterinarian, I'm like, whoa, wait a second, Why don't we focus more on the Varroa itself? Is anybody out there farming cattle or farming? Is there anybody that has like livestock or a horse or something like this? Nobody? Oh my God! All right. So, but anyway, if you like have, even if a dog, a cat, anybody? Do we have animal people here? All right, good. I was like, are they pranking me? He's a veterinarian. But anyway, if you have a dog, a cat, a horse, a cow, like what do the veterinarians do? Like they deworm, right? You get a dewormer, you get like the little Seresto color, right? Because like you want to basically make the life of the parasite horrible, like, right? You want to make sure that the life cycle of the parasite is not being established. So that's one way to think about it. And so I'm thinking, hey, why don't we have more discussions about Varroa directly? What does Varroa want? Like, let's look at the Varroa mite. What does it want? And we take this from the Varroa. Can we potentially fight that whole thing with making life for Varroa miserable? And maybe there's a good kind of thing that actually, if we make life for Varroa miserable, maybe the bees don't mind, right? I mean, so we got to think maybe that way. So that's it. So can we modify something, right, for that? Have you guys recently heard this, like the latest thing to heat up your beehive? Like to kill Varroa, have you seen that? There's actually devices being sold, like, the bee sauna, just like make the bee sweat and Varroa will drop out. It's like, interesting. So I'm kind of like, interesting. Somebody finally thinks about, making life for Varroa difficult instead of just focusing on the bee. So anyway, so that's my background. So anyway, what I'm saying today is kind of like, I recently published that in actually a really nice peer-reviewed journal of apiculture research. So I can send you the PDF if you want to, but basically I'm just saying, again, this is a peer-reviewed paper, which means a lot of smart people, much smarter than me, reviewed that manuscript, right? And then I had to answer a couple of questions, like, it's like, but then they're like, yeah, the guy's onto something, so what do I want to say? Like, and this is the basic for this talk. When I look at the beehive, right, I'm going to be like, as a veterinarian, I'm going to have a clinical mindset. So I'm going to be like, okay, if this bee would come to you as a clinic, if this hive would come to your clinic, if you go to the doctor, what do they do first, right? So this is why, obviously, you all know it's silly. We're not going to really focus on a bee. We're focusing on a colony, right? A hive as a superorganism. You had Dr. Delaplane talk in the past. Like, that's what he's all about, right? It's like if you have an apiary with 15 hives, that will be going to a farm with 15 heads of cattle, right? That would be the equivalent to it. So that's how we look at it. So what do you do first? I'm going to take the temperature, right? So like, right? Because I mean, nowadays they do the little forehead swab or whatever. They don't do this anymore. But it's like, so that's what we all do. You bring your dog or cat. What do? We take the temperature, right? It's like a basic thing. So can we do something like this? Well, again, I'm sorry. I have quite a few slides because I speak, as you heard from my accent, I speak a little bit of German, and for some reason the Germans are obsessed with this, and maybe that's my genetic thing. It's like, so there's a lot of papers, there's a lot of book chapters written in German. So, but anyway, as you can imagine, this is a cross-section of a tree. There's how many holes going in there? One. Where's the hole? At the bottom, right? How many ventilation holes do we have on top? What do we keep teaching everybody? Ventilate your hives, ventilate your hives. I'm like, really? Should we? Low temperature, high temperature. Okay, this is how they live. This is what they've been doing for over 20 million years. They know something about a microclimate, right? This is actually a hive from Switzerland. Same thing, biologists were kind of like, hey, if we keep bees, maybe we should kind of like do what they do in the wild. So as you see, not like your normal kind of what I call the IKEA hive, you know, the 1/4-inch plywood thing, you know. Like they kind of be like, nah, we should be like a tree trunk, all right? The fact that it's round is kind of like maybe a little bit romantic or whatever, but you could have little Langstroth box as long as it's kind of like that thick, you know, it's like that would bring the point across, all right? It doesn't have to be round. But to me, this would be the equivalent. The bees in the wild, they live in a castle. Okay, so I'm from Germany. On every molehill, there's a castle somewhere, right? I mean, it's beautiful. Love it, love it, love it. If you ever go there in the summer, like right now, July, you know, we have the same temperature a lot of times. You go into this castle, and you're like, oh, this is like balmy. This is nice and cool, right? Sir Lancelot didn't have air conditioning going, right? But think about it, how long it would take the sun to really heat up that rock, right? It's never going to be. That rock is going to have this temperature and it's going to sit there at a very comfy temperature. So I don't care, the rock doesn't care, it's 115 outside. Inside that castle, it's going to be a balmy 75, right? Because it's a heat sink, right? Exactly the opposite in the winter. So outside, -20, they have one big room with a little fire going. That fire heats up the rock, the fire heats up the whole thing. Even if the fire would go out overnight when everybody's asleep for 2 hours, you light it up the next morning, the rocks are still hot. That castle is kind of like, to me, this is a bee castle, okay? What do we do with those? What do we do in captivity? I'll get to it in a second. So again, 25 million years ago, they know a thing or something about how to build a home. So again, a lot of researchers in Europe, they're kind of like, all right, let's just drop like some probes in there and see, you know, what's going on inside. Let's take a look at temperature, humidity, right? What happens in there? So it's like we first need to understand what's going on, and then I think we can do a much better job replicating it. So again, this is from a book. This is actually a veterinary honeybee book. So it's like we have two real books. One of them is coming from actually from the United States. The other one is from Europe. So really cool. But again, you see the cross section, right? What's happening here? Entrance. There we store the honey. Honey, you have it in English, beautiful. And that's what we do to them in captivity. Yeah. All right. This is my castle, and this is my tent. Right? I mean, think about it. Like, outside now, who wants to go and sleep in a tent tonight? Exactly, nobody, right? Because in the tent it's going to be 135 degrees too. So, but there is no insulation. There's nothing. So we literally kind of like this is very unnatural environment, and we force them in there. And the girls are so good that they're like, yeah, we'll stay. If I would be a bee, I'm like, yeah, no, man. This is like, I'm not going to live in a tent, you know? So no way. Same thing in winter and summer. We expose them to extremes, you know, which is really brutal. So, but that's what they want to live with. So again, we know actually, right, that the brood nest that inside the hive, they actually maintain a constant temperature of around 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Which is so romantic. I mean, there's this, one of my favorite books is written by a German, and like, it's just a coincidence, but I highly recommend you guys, if you're a little bit into science, if you want to read a little, but it's really cool, it's like hardcore science, but it's written kind of like a little story, and I couldn't put it down. It was not like, oh, and then the, so it's called The Buzz About Bees. It's a really cool book. And so what he does, it's a German entomologist, obviously really good. So it's like a German Delaplane, more or less. And so he came up with this romantic idea, and he says, you know what? Like the honeybee should actually become an honorary mammal, right? Because the honeybee has so many physiological things that it does. Because an insect, a reptile, a fish, right? All these things. One of that differences, like for example, a reptile hibernates, right? Because it can't maintain its body temperature, because they're dependent on the outside body temperature, right? That's why when you go to Florida in January, the weather, literally the weather forecast is like, tonight it's going to rain iguanas, right? Because it's so cold that literally the iguanas drop out of the palm tree, right? So because they're kind of like, it's cold, nothing works, and they literally fall out of the thing. So the bees inside a constant 95 degrees, so their body temperature is actually more like a mammal, which is for an insect really crazy to consider, right? But now hopefully you get the ideas like, do I want to live in a tent or do I want to live in a castle? Because they have to maintain that. So if you have to maintain a temperature, who do you think has to burn through more coal? The one in the tent in the winter or the one in the castle, right? So again, this is one company that I just mentioned because I use their product, I kind of understand their product, and I really do like their product. So this is one of those little temperature and humidity sensors. So you get temperature, you get humidity, and then it connects to your iPhone. You're just within 50 feet of your hive, and then you kind of like, oh, so you kind of know what's going on inside your hive. So it's kind of flat. You just lie where you think the brood nest is. And then every 5 seconds or whatever the setting is, you can do it for every 15 minutes. It records the temperature, and then it downloads to your phone, and then you have these curves, and you know exactly what over the last 72 hours or over the last month happened within your beehive, and you didn't even open it, which is phenomenal for January when you're wondering. It's like, oh, it's like outside it's 40 degrees, nobody's flying. So if you hang out, if you hover in front of the landing board, you're not going to see much activity. But you're kind of like, I don't know, do I need to order from Bob Binney's Bees? Because I don't know if they're alive or not. You don't want to open it because it's 40 degrees, so you destroy, kind of like that nice little heat shield. So versus you just look on your thing, it's like, oh yeah, it's a nice temperature, which is significantly different. So my colony is still alive, right? Versus if the inside temperature matches the outside temperature, you better order your bees in, right? So basically that also tells you, right, this dotted line is actually the environmental. So because they download the data, they know exactly, or you put in, I'm in Gainesville, so that thing can download Gainesville data. So if your data is exactly the same, that hive is in doo-doo, right? I mean, like, because it mimics exactly what's going on outside. So this is, I already know this is super weak. This is May. That thing should be booming, So without even opening, I know this is a weak hive, right? So, so this is the power of data. So this is, for example, coming out of winter. So up there, so I have my fancy teaching hive, so all of them are on scales too. So I gotta wait too. So like, they're coming out of winter. What happens? Oh, I'm gonna feed them, and then they kind of like, they consume stuff. Now they're getting active, right? So there's energy, the engines rev. So they're going through it, right? Because the engines start revving here. Usually my queens all start laying on the 20th of January, which is amazing. So here you see, this is still December, so they're not really paying too much attention because the queen hasn't started laying. So it's not tightly regulated. The moment she starts laying, look how suddenly it becomes like a mammal, right? I mean, so now you have the brood nest, which is, for a mammal, the equivalent of a uterus. Like, this is where your next generation is coming from. So those babies need to be incubated. And we can't have that for incubation. This is not going to be smart bees coming out of there. But look at this. This is like just fluctuating within a couple of degrees. So now I know, like that's why I say usually around the 20th of January she starts laying, the brood nest is fully built out, right? And the humidity is like, we'll talk a little bit about later about humidity, but this is the power of data. Like literally me walking by this, I don't even need to open that hive in February. It's like, I'm gonna get a super ready because I gotta get super up pretty soon for these ones, right? Again, for my students, it's really cool. So one of the projects that I do in the vet school is like, like in the vet school, it's like 4 years, and then the first 3 years are fairly, spend all your time in the lecture theater, listening to people like me, and then you get homework, and you get to read books, and there's tests, and maybe there's a formalin fixed animal that you can do the dissection, right? but they usually keep those younger students away from animals with heartbeats and stuff, right? Because they're like, oh, it could bleed, no. You can watch, but you can't touch. And so with this, I can actually take my first year students out and can say in the bee club and say, hey, like, you guys are responsible for a living organism. You better get that thing through the winter, right? And they're like, oh God, responsibility. Oh. Or as they say now, adulting, you know, kind of like, oh, I don't want to do it. But anyway, but what I'm saying is, it's really cool. I can literally, you give me any topic in veterinary medicine, and I can teach it using the honeybee as an equivalent, like as a surrogate for it. It's like, oh, I can teach you concepts, you know, and to me, for example, this concept that I can teach him here, that would be the concept of surgery, you know, and so you have to go into surgery, or you have to do surgery on an animal, right, and then you cut the belly open, right, to spay or fix that bone or whatever it is, take the appendix out. If we open the abdominal cavity, what happens to the body temperature? It goes down, right? That's why a lot of times in these ORs, the temperature are up, you know, and the surgeons sweat, like hot yoga. And so look, this was literally like, this was in May, we did an inspection there. Look what happened to the body temp of that core nest, right? So this is why when we do inspections and it's not super hot, and here in May, you see that outside temperature was just 45 degrees, right? So what I say, look, I'm not a bad teacher right now. I don't want to be that guy, but I'm not going to keep these frames out and show everybody for 15 minutes, oh, look, there's a brood. So I'm going to be like verified as brood, whatever, see what the food is, but we're going to put that back because we don't want to chill the brood, right? So this is great. So I can literally do this. So there's the opposite. Like, you know, this is what the sun does. Like, that sun was out in full force. So we basically gave that brood nest a little fever, right? So not normal. That's like a huge spike. The other thing that could happen with this, if you have that signal in there, and you're going back to the hive, and you're like, oh my God, last week the hive was so strong, and I'm like, what's going on? This is what happens when they swarm. So you see this spike going up because 20,000 bees get ready, the engines, ladies, start your engine. And they're doing this, and then, like, if you've ever witnessed a swarm, right, it's magnificent how many bees leave. And so they spike. So you kind of like, oh, wow, you know. Why are the bees not active? Well, because you just had a swarm event happening, right? Because otherwise I would walk by and I'm like, huh, last week they looked really good. Why do they look different? Shit, I lost this one. Yeah, right? So again, this is my equivalent to surgery. It's like, all right, like if your animal is stable, if everything is okay, you can take your time, and you know, here's the liver, here's the kidney, you know. Versus like, oh, this is critical. Let's not do a grand tour of all the organs and just like fix what's going on, and you know, it's like. So it doesn't have to be kind of like this. So this is just, I played around. So I just got one from Amazon. This is like one of those kitchen thermometers, and so you can put that in there too. And then again, this is like this with iPhone technology, and like they're $20 or whatever, right? So again, not my opinion, Journal of Agriculture, that's the one where I submitted the other paper for. So again, temperature increase, you know, can predict swarming. So what they noticed is like, so basically they swarmed here, and you see it like 20 minutes before they start to swarm, they're rough at the engine, and then when everybody leaves the hive, and you see about 10 minutes later, you have this peak temperature, right? Because there was a lot of energy in there. And you can see this with your app. That's a swarm right there. And the cool thing is, you can trigger, you can set the algorithm. You see the computer already put a dot on there. You can actually get a push notification. It's like, oh, there's a temperature event. And so if you get that, and you get in there in time, so that was, you know, so that was at 5 p.m. I've noticed this, like, they swarm a lot of times in the evening. If I would be a bee, I'd be like, okay, let's get up in the morning, use sun, but for some reason, they like to swarm at the end. I don't know what it is. But anyway, if you get this, you could literally go to your bee, because usually, right, they put up a beewax swarm, like 50 to 100 feet, so just look around, or maybe listen to where that bee, and then you have a really fat chance of catching your own swarm back again. That's like, what, $200? So catching one swarm pays for a lot of that equipment already right there, right? Because a lot of times it's like, oh yeah, that costs a lot of money. I'm like, no, it doesn't cost a lot of money. It's a great investment because you can recoup that very quickly with literally just catching one swarm, right? I just want to make a point here, and I'm going to talk about it later, but notice how the humidity is grayed out because we teach that between 50 and 75%. And look how my humidity runs way above that. And I'm very proud of myself for doing this. So just put a pin in this, talk about. All right, difference between, so again, goes back to that heat transfer, right? So think about it, if you're in the business of selling your honey, right? 10 pounds of honey, you do the math, whatever you get out of this. So going back to the castle, the honey that you harvest at the end of the year, right? That's basically kind of like the fuel. That's the kindling that you need to keep your tent warm or your castle warm, right? If you have nicely insulated hives, I mean, I literally, like, my spring inspection now, I was going in there, I'm like, oh my God, this is like, I think they're dead. And what happened is the batteries in some of these things died, so I didn't have this. I'm like, oh no, I opened up, I had two boxes of, like 2 deep supers in there, looked, and like, it was completely packed with honey, right? And I'm like, and that was in January, end of January. I'm like, oh, I probably lost that. I'm like, no, they were all still downstairs. They haven't even eaten their way into the second super because they didn't need that. So I'm like, oh, it's like, so that literally, that investment into these better insulated hives literally saves you money because they're not burning, they're not using all this honey to literally fuel the temperature. That means you get to harvest more honey in a year. I mean, it's like I said, this is why it's not an expense, it's actually an investment. And you can recoup that very quickly. So again, outside temperature, green, okay? And then you see yellow, this is in the lower tree, and this is in the upper tree. Can you guys read this, or can I just make stuff up? So, okay, lower tree, upper tree, ambient temperature, so the same thing. Can you see how the lower tree and the upper tree is a little bit more that line? And up there, good luck trying to separate that, right? This is your tent. Outside temperature equals inside temperature, versus this is your castle. The king in the castle doesn't care if it's snowing, if it's raining out there. It's kind of like keep that fire a little bit stoked, because that keeps us warm. That's exactly what I mean. So these guys need to use a lot of honey, a lot of energy, a lot of protein, a lot of stuff to keep that tent warm. These guys can relax, So, all right. So again, are we helping them, or are we causing a problem, right? So I'm kind of like, I think, if we're trying to put them in this insulated hive, if we're trying to mimic what's happening in nature, I think we're keeping bees just healthier. Just think about it. Who's healthier? The guy has to work out in the field like 12 hours a day, right? Physically, like getting a little bit of bread in the evening and water, or the guy that has a nice salad, has maybe a steak here and there, gets a pizza, right? And maybe drives back to work. It's like, I want to be that guy. Both of them survive, both of them are doing great, but one of them is probably kind of like not, not doing that great. And I think that's why that's my opinion, we experience these huge losses because we're doing a really bad job keeping them over the winter, because stuff like this, because we're not mimicking. So this is the natural situation. This is actually, a tree felling company actually took that in Romania, and so they were really cool. And so they brought it actually to the university there, because they have also a bee institute, but they cut down trees, there's the thing, and then, kind of like, hey, and you see snow, and they're doing really well, and they're doing much better. So again, I'm sorry, this is a German thing, but so basically, this is a cross-section of one side of the tree. So you take a tree, this is the outside world, right? This is the wood, this is the bee nest. They're obviously honeycomb and everything. So this means humidity, relative humidity. Look inside that thing. The worst humidity inside it is like 70%. And remember what we teach, what we read in the books, like 50 to maximum 70. So brood nest, up to 80, 90. So, and then obviously here it's 100% because this is how the tree drinks, right? So the roots, and then it brings the water up to the leaves. But that's what's going on in nature. Bees want it really humid. And what do we teach? Maximum 70. And the bee's like, no, we're just starting to have fun, right? 50 to 70, I'm like, I want to get this up. All right, so again, between the unoccupied honeycombs and the tree cavity, so they did a lot of math, you know. So it's only slightly higher than in the bee cluster. So even with that, they really want a high. There's a lot of condensation water happening inside, and so I think I'm going to show you a picture actually where we can go into the camera endoscopically, and you actually see water on bees, because again, the word on the street is like, bees can't get wet. I'm like, really? So this poor bee that flies, a raindrop comes, I'm like, oh, water soluble, I can't get wet. Like, what? No, bees can get wet. They can't get like wet with dirty water, because then it's bacteria. This is where the propolis envelope comes in, right? Because literally those tree trunks inside, they're kind of more or less sterile. But anyway, so this is a nice illustration that I also took from a German book. So again, this is kind of like your heat, your cluster, your bee cluster. This is in that Torben tree, and in that it's called Torben hive, and this is our bee cluster in there. You realize what a heat sink that is, versus the heat stays nicely there. So the equivalent, how I like to look at it, is like, this is me underneath a blankie, right? I'm like, yeah, I sleep like this. This would be me without a blankie, right? So, because I'm like, yeah, my body temperature is okay, but I'm gonna radiate a lot of heat out of there. And where's the blankie? It's hovering somewhere up there, right? So I'm conscious, and that's what we do to them. That's what we do to them. This is a really interesting paper that recently came out from Derek Mitchell. He's actually an engineer from Great Britain. He's like a mechanical engineer, way smarter than me, like very smart. He loves math and do this stuff. And somehow he got into bees. And so he figured out, this is a really great paper, but basically the point is that bees don't cluster because they like each other so much. They cluster because it's like, I don't want to die. Literally, that's what they're saying to you. So the moment you heat them up, the moment you give them that environment, you're going to see a decrease of the cluster. They're going to be like, oh God, thank God, because it's kind of like, to me, that clustering, that's the fetal position. That's what I do when I have to sleep without a blankie on the couch. I mean, not that I would ever have to sleep on the couch, but I'm saying, right? This is how you find me at 3 in the morning. I'm like, ugh, right? Would I survive? Absolutely. But would I like a blankie and stretched out? Yeah, absolutely. And so this is basically what he documented, right? So this is sleeping comfy versus sleeping in a fetal position. Okay. So basically to show that clustering is not benign, but instead is an evolutionary behavioral mechanism to an existential threat that results in increased codon. So basically a cluster is not a good thing to see. It's kind of like an existential threat, which is, again, what? That's me at home doing some experiments. So I'm kind of like, okay, I'm not going to convince everybody to give up beekeeping and stuff like this, but can we do something? Can we maybe I'm all about compromises. And so my thinking is that, hey, so I cut the tree came down, so I carved it out with the chainsaw, I made a little entrance here with the chainsaw, and then I'm like, how about the bees, if they're smart enough, they're going to stay down here with a brood nest, and then can we just do a compromise and put like some Langstroth thing, and then their instinct is to put the food above, right? And then I built this little platform, and so I put my normal Langstroth hive up there, so that's about 15 feet, that's what, we kind of get taught by people like Tom Seeley and stuff, that this is what they prefer. So look at the environment. This is literally next to my driveway, so the neighboring thing, there's a cow pasture, and it's Georgia sun, and this is in the woods, right? So if this would have been a multiple choice question, and it's like, here's these two pictures, which hive is a little bit cooler inside? I would be like, dude, this thing's in the shadow. It's like, it's in the woods. This is going to be cooler. Let's take a look. So, tree stump, a strump, actually, I wish I could spell. But, and then the high tree. So the high tree is this, and the tree stump is this. So we are in the 90s here, and so this is the 80s. So the one in the full sun is actually over 10 degrees cooler than the one in the full shade in the trees. Right? What? Again, humidity, I would have failed that exam too. It's like, which one is more humid? This one in the full sun, or this one in the boggy woods? I'm like, this one. All right, let's take a look at humidity. 70, 80%, you know, and so then we have the high tree stump, 50%. The one in the full Georgia sun is about 20% higher humidity. I mean, we all have been outside, right? Full sun is, that beehive never gets a little bit of shade. There's nothing. It gets blasted all day. 20% higher humidity than that one that is never getting full sun. Castle tent, right? So yeah, so the other thing again, yeah, you see the cow pasture, that's my little thing. Then I have this one. So so you see the stump, the trunk stump. Look at the brood zone. Look at this one. Whoa! And that's one of my UGA hives. Nice, right? I mean, again, it's not my opinion. It's like data. It's like these things are insulated, they're regulating it beautiful, and these ones over there, they got to fight for every degree, and they got to fight for every percentage of humidity. There's a question?
Yes, sir. So would plastic frames have an effect, since in the tree trunk, you know, are we using plastic?
Yeah, great question. I never thought about it. Would plastic, what do you think plastic would do? What do you have?
Decrease the temperature, it's not an insect.
Oh, decrease the temperature. Oh, yeah, no. From that point of view, that doesn't make it. Because again, your frames inside, think about that balloon in there, you know, that's not going to have, it's all about the outside. It's all about the outside. I was more thinking of humidity.
That third graph at the bottom, how do you, that UGA 8,
Yep.
how do you get it that stable?
I'll show you in a second.
Okay.
I'll show you.
Is that
Again,
because-
I'm not going to earn money when I mention a product, but you ask, it's like it's a specific product. Yeah. About the stump, yep.
Yes. Do you have any equipment in there, or is it just a hollowed out stump?
So yeah, that's a great question. So what I do with a chainsaw, so I make kind of like a square. And then what I did at the beginning, I probably wouldn't do it now anymore, but I just dropped a couple of frames, empty frames in for them to have a little architecture thing. So, and and then obviously this is a inner board, inner cover with the hole in there, and then I let them go up in it. So, but I just dropped a couple of frames, and then I let them do whatever they want. Also, I would never ever inspect there. And because obviously you constantly want to inspect the lunch if we can, but I'm going to let them propolis it. I'm going to, like, this would be a wild thing, and if they want to connect all those 3-4 frames that I have, go for it, connect them. I'm not going to pull that out. I'm going to leave you alone. But how about a compromise? I leave you alone. I provide you a castle, and then I can harvest them there, right? And so this is where that idea comes from. That I probably get to harvest way more here, because these guys, they constantly have to get up to the gas station, get more honey, we need more fuel to keep the brood nest warm. Versus, they're kind of like, I don't know, I don't even know where the gas station is, right? So then I built, so I again, with me and the chainsaw. So I hollowed that out, I put a little IKEA lid on there so I could open it. I don't know what I was thinking. I shouldn't be opening it, but I was like, I want to pick it. But again, temperature keeps it nicely up in there. And then again, humidity, look what's happening, over 85%. I'm happy, I'm a happy man. Seeing that temperature so high. This is what it kind of looks like. So that's what I did, is I just put a couple of pegs in there. I baited it with a little bit of honey. I just like squeezed it in there, and that was like after a year. And this is really cool. So I'm just hanging this in there. And so the first scout bees arrive. So it's really cool. So like they're doing their little inspection. They get their little iPhone out. I'm like, take some pictures. And they're measuring it, right? 40 liters. They want to have a certain thing. So that's pretty cool. That was pretty cool for me to see. And then a little bit later, a wild swarm is moving in, which is fascinating, right? So because I kind of didn't want to I wanted to say, okay, put your money where your mouth is. If this is really such a good house, Meyer, the word will spread. And if the word spread, we should be moving in pretty soon. Boom, a couple of weeks later, the word spread. They're moving in there within 10 minutes. Because they're like, guys, I found a castle, we can move out of a tent. They're like, what? You know, so yeah. Same thing here. So again, this is my little Trump, so I have a little, maybe with a little Trump, I play around with stuff. So, you know, I got this round little thing from China, I got the normal one, and and guess which one the wild swarm picked? Right? They're like, yeah, screw this, this is where we want to live. Another swarm moved in. Yo.
Sorry, have you got a picture of what it looks like once they have what they have inside?
Oh yeah, there was just the hanging one.
Yeah.
Can I go back?
Sorry, I didn't see it.
Oh. Where was it? There. See, I opened the door, empty before they moved in. U-Haul.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and that's why it's like let them also. There's a lot of data out there with how the comb should actually be for the optimal airflow to ensure that. So there's actually a lot of data on termite mounds. The same thing, termites mound in Africa, South America. It's like the same thing because they're actually gardeners, termites, right? And so they have this garden. You maybe have seen those National Geographic movies, the ants, the leafcutter ants, where they cut the, right? And so they're bringing those ants back into their garden because they're literally like have, this is basically, yeah, what they grow. They have fungus growing stuff, but they need to have everything like at a super constant temperature, super regulated. And so that's the same thing. So the termite mounds, they have little holes, and the termites will block and open the holes according how they see fit. I mean, it's like they literally invented air conditioning. You know, like this is air conditioning at its best thing. So this is why I don't disturb them. And I love that. Look at this. They're all kind of like there with their butt in the air. The Narsanov clans, right? It's like, move in. This is a great home. Move in. We found a castle. Right? And it's just fascinating to stand next to it. I'm always surprised how quickly it happens. Like 10 minutes later, it's over. I'm like, oh, can we do that again? So here's the really cool thing that I find cool. Nobody talks about. Again, this is from a German publication, 1997. Most of my students these days weren't even born then. Look at this. This is Naturwissenschaften. So this is basically one of the highest ranking scientific journals in the German. So it's kind of like we have science here. So if you publish in science, everybody's like, hats off. Hardcore. High humidity in the honeybee brood nest limits reproduction of the parasitic, well, you know, Varroa. What? Varroa females obviously react very sensitively to high relative humidity and almost never reproduce at levels above 80%. See my drift now, why I want my humidity above 80%, why I'm pushing that humidity, like, get up there. I'm disrupting the brood cycle. I'm like providing anti-parasitic environment. And then that got me thinking. The present data provided a simple explanation of the fact how often tropical climates. So I'm thinking, okay, where did Varroa come from, right? From Apis cerana, from Asia, right? From Indonesia and stuff. So they live on Apis cerana, and like the common thing that you read in every book is like, oh, they're co-involved, the Apis cerana clean them off, you know, but it might all be true, but how does Apis cerana live in the wild? Do they live in boxes? No, they just live like, right, they build they're out on branches, they have the free hanging thing. So if you ever go to Indonesia, where Varroa, where Apis cerana is from, guess what the humidity is? It's every day, rainforest. So they actually live outside the box, but in the rainforest and the trunk, and the humidity is super high. So that itself really pushes Varroa, gives Varroa a really hard time to reproduce. So what do? Maximum 70%, keep it at 50. Varroa is like, yeah, 50. Let's have babies, right? So we are creating this incredible environment inside those IKEA boxes, and we should be very proud of ourselves. We should call ourselves Varroa breeders that have a bee problem. I mean, that's literally what we're doing, kind of like. And then what kills me, I mean, you can even see on the font, like all my students would see, this is probably from before the war, right? I mean, that's not the latest, hottest news. Yeah, that was a publication, I think, from the 50s. But here, optimal range for hatching, and that's no bee eggs larvae, hatching, was found to be between 90 and 95% relative humidity. There was a significant decline in the number of normal larvae that emerged when eggs were incubated. Okay, underwater, we shouldn't incubate them underwater, right? And so at 50%, what we currently say, 50% is great. At 50% humidity, many eggs shriveled up, only 3% produced normal larvae. Keep it at 50 to 60%. No eggs hatched at humidities below 50%. Which kind of makes sense. It's like, oh, they're coming from hot, like tropical climates. We put them in a desert climate. They don't do well. Same paper. Relative humidity 100%, 50%. Again, bee eggs hatched. So normal larvae. Pay attention to this. That's what we want. We want more or less close to 100% normal larvae. What do I have to keep my humidity on? 90 to 95%. What do we keep it? 70? Yeah, if you want 5% of your bees successfully hatched, keep it at 70%. Again, not my opinion. I'm just digging through old literature that has been ignored forever. Other paper. Basically, the hydro preference of brood care. So basically, if we ask the bees, what do you prefer? What do you prefer? You know, results showed a young bee worker in the absence exhibit a weak hygroscopic through 75%. All right? Since the eggs, so this is the same paper. Since the eggs require a relative humidity of above 55, again, because otherwise we have 0% hatch, with the highest survival between 90 and 95. So again, this is a little bit more modern paper, so it's sometimes science does like, wait a second, these guys in the 50s said it should be this, let's repeat this to see that they weren't drunk, right? Came to the same conclusion, right? High humidity would also benefit brood development indirectly, since the reproductive success of Varroa decreases within. The data is out there. I mean, like again, I'm not making this up, I'm just finding stuff in the literature, and I'm like, why? What bothers me is like, where did that recommendation come from? 50 to 70%. I have no idea, right? So, what I want you to think of the Varroa is a very dirty animal. Dirty, dirty, does not want to take a shower. Water drowns the babies, and makes it sick. So we want to have a nice humid environment because Varroa doesn't like this, okay? This is what I downloaded from the internet. It's like crazy. And this statement contradicts itself in its own terms. I'm like, did you even read what you put out there? It's like, bees need much higher in constant temperature and levels of humidity, 52, remember 70%? And like optimally to provide overall fitness of the colony. Disagree. And anything outside will prevent healthy brood reign. Below 50%, they won't hatch. Okay, that's correct. But you know, higher levels of humidity significantly decrease Varroa production. And actually, some kind of like, so you were so close. You were so close. You know, so because, like again, optimal levels of 50 between 60. That's what you call optimal. I don't know. I must be doing something wrong because I want that. So this is how you want to think of a bee. It's like a little flying duckling. They want the water, right? Like the little girls, the babies, they need their water. They want that. Again, old study from 1969. Holy cow. Again, inside the tree nest. This means brood, and these are the humidity levels again. When they have brood, see what they do to the humidity level? Increase it. So this is why these are my hives from the school. Oh, you asked why, how I get this line? It's a hive. I thought I have a couple of pictures, maybe they come, but they're Epimay hives. It's like a company that is from Turkey, and they produce hives that have a styrofoam core and then a plastic outside. Maybe there's some pictures coming. But look, I want all my, this is a poor hive. It's like, what the hell are you doing? right? Temperature, so maybe inspection, maybe swarming in it, I don't know. So, and also I always say it's like, spend a lot of times just hanging out with your bees, just looking at them, because they will talk to you. You just need to forget what you learned in bee school. Just like start with a blank and just look at them. Just like, what are they telling me? And what is, does that make sense with what I learned? Or should you go back to your teacher and say, hey, Dr. Mai, you said this, but actually, right? So again, this is my driveway. This is the trunk stump there. This is the AP May hive, so this is a super insulated one. This is a top bar hive. Okay, so you see that they're in the same kind of exposure, no shade, nothing. So again, we're thinking about this. So again, so they're communicating with us. So this is the AP May hive, and you just have to take my word for it. These two videos are taken within like 15 seconds of each other. So the other thing that I don't believe is in ventilation. So you see all my ventilation ports are completely closed. I do not believe in ventilation. Everything is shut, shut, shut. Because what do I want to do? I want to mimic the oak tree. How many holes in an oak tree? 0. So I don't ventilate my girls. So again, it's a summery day. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, less than 10 bees ventilating. Okay? Yeah, I'm pushing some air in there. 15 seconds walk down to the other hive. Look at them, they even look sluggish, right? They look like if we would have had this lecture outside, I would have lost like 3/4 of you. And that's what they're doing. They're being kicked out of the hive. They're like, you're not doing anything, get out. You're just increasing the temperature. We don't need you. Hang out outside. I don't want to fly. You don't have to fly, but you're not staying in here. Which of these two hives is actually producing something? And which of these hives is actually, at the end of the season, going to be a better one? My money would be on that hive, right? So, again, this is these hives. This is a feeder, so this is on top of them, so you can feed them without ever disturbing them. So you can put. But what caught my eye is like even that company, it's kind of like we need to have little ventilation slots in there. And the bees are like, no, you don't. Let me fill this with propolis. Like, I'll help you. Yeah. Let me literally propolis every ventilation slot. But you need ventilation. They're like, no, we've been doing this for 25 million years. We're good. We figured this ventilation thing out. The 10 bees up front that you saw, they will do the ventilation. Not you. Thanks for your help. All right? Because otherwise, why would they do this? They would be like, oh, this is great, thank you. So yeah. So again, recently I took that, no, not recently. Oh yeah, 25, yeah, so much.